Amnesty International has called for the urgent eradication of pit toilets in South Africa following the death of a 4-year-old girl whose body was found inside a pit toilet at a primary school in Glengrey in the Eastern Cape, according to the 2021 National Education Infrastructure Management System report. More than 1,400 schools in the Eastern Cape had pit toilets. Over the last decade, a number of children have died in pit toilets. For some reaction now on this latest story, we are joined by Mienke Steytler, the spokesperson at Amnesty International South Africa. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Now, this child's death comes a week after the Department of Basic Education actually missed yet another deadline to eradicate all illegal plain pit toilets from South Africa. What seems to be the problem?
Communication and transparency. Of course, it's a huge job to eradicate a country of infrastructure that's been there for a long time. But the constant moving of deadlines, the constant silence as well is just really unacceptable. And we could not believe when we received the news yesterday of this little girl being found deceased inside a pit toilet. Of course, the police are investigating this, but we decided that it was just important to call on government again that these pit toilets really have to be eradicated. You know, whatever the circumstances of her ending up in the toilet, those toilets are incredibly dangerous, and we just cannot accept it anymore. The government said in 2013 that all the toilets would be identified by 2016 and then eradicated by 2020. That didn't happen. Of course, there was a pandemic, which we all know, affected everybody. But then last year, Minister Motshekga said that they were going to eradicate the toilets by the end of this financial year, or the end of the 2022 into 2023 financial year, which was last week, the 28th of February. And still no update from the Department of Education, and then this tragic event.
Now, the police are investigating the circumstances of this child's death, but I'm wondering, will it change anything, the outcome? Because, I mean, unfortunately, the person who became very much the face of young children falling into pit latrines, as you know, Michael Komape in Limpopo, and that was years ago. What would change with the police investigation?
Yes. No, nothing changes. Even if the government was to say there's different circumstances around her death, the existence of these toilets and the fact that she was found there and she's so young and vulnerable just doesn't change the status of and the danger of these toilets. These toilets really violate so many rights: the right to privacy, the right to dignity, the right to sanitation, the right to life in this case as well. And not, as you mentioned, Michael, and there was a little boy in December as well in Limpopo. And so there's actually been a number of children. And these, one must also think about are maybe children we know about, right? So we just do not understand why there are still further delays. Last year, they tabled amendments to the regulations around the norms and standards of infrastructure at public schools in South Africa. Amnesty International and a number of other organizations made submissions. In these amendments, the government was saying they wanted to remove all deadlines, for example, and we as an organization said, no, there have to be deadlines. Otherwise, it's difficult to then, have any legal accountability. But since then, there's been no update on the status of those amendments, on those regulations. And also when we try to research how many of these toilets still exist, or what is the progress that government is making, there's all these different reports. The annual report says something different from their National Education Infrastructure System reports that they bring out every year. And so there's this inconsistency in data, and we just feel that goalposts are moved, data is inconsistent, and there's no real, it appears, political will to do this.
And I want to just reflect on the figures. I think in 2013, the department said about 7,500 schools still had pit latrines. And as you're talking about these amendments, I mean, I looked through some of them earlier on. I couldn't really make head or tail of them, but perhaps you can just tell us. I mean, one of them says all schools and classrooms built entirely or substantially from mud, as well as those schools built entirely or substantially from materials such as asbestos, metal, wood, must be replaced with structure compliance with some of these amendments. But has there been any material change? And how many schools are we talking about now today in South Africa that have pit latrines?
Yes, exactly. So that is one of the things that we've pointed out, is that when you do go and look at these reports and in the different infrastructure programs that the department has, you get different figures. So they did release their annual report quite recently, and in that they said that there were just under 3,000 schools who still have pit latrines. Again, they didn't give any real detail around, do some of these schools have mixed ablutions, so they might be pit latrines, but maybe there's another option as well, or do these schools only have pit latrines? And but then when we look at last year's National Education Infrastructure Systems report, which really is quite detailed, then it's just over 5,000 schools that have pit latrines or pit toilets, their toilets. But again, is this a mix? Are these only pit toilets? We do acknowledge, of course, that this is a huge job, right? This is a huge thing. There's also a lot of this infrastructure was built during those terrible years of apartheid, and so we acknowledge that, but you can't be putting deadlines for yourself and then keep missing them, and then we have a loss of life. It's just unacceptable that a child has to lose her life because of the shortfalls of government and the failures of government. And how many children is South Africa and families and communities going to have to lose before this is taken seriously? There has to be greater transparency around the data, how many toilets there really are, and how many of them are plain pit latrines. So to explain is those are the ones that are unventilated and unsanitary. I mean, they're awful. I mean, you're showing some visuals here as well, exactly that. And they also have to give an update on what is the status of the regulations, so that there were targets, concrete targets to eradicating this, and they really need to stick to deadlines. You can't just keep moving deadlines. If you and I were missing deadlines in our jobs, we would be held accountable. So the same accounts for government.
All right. In short, Mienke, what are you hoping to do as Amnesty International following this case? Are you exploring any options that may include legal to compel the government to, meet its obligations and the deadlines, as you say, it set itself?
Yes, so we continue to call on them. We actually did write to them, obviously internally, asking for transparency around this. This was about just under a month ago. We've received no acknowledgement of the reception of the letter. We've received no response, but often we understand that obviously the workloads are high, but just acknowledgement of a letter would go a long way. So we are going to make that letter public, and we're really just going to talk a lot more publicly about this again with them, hoping that they will engage with us. And that is what we'll be doing at this stage.
All right, thank you so much. Mienke Steytler, spokesperson at Amnesty International.